podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Koen Vanpraet, Group CEO of PXP Financial. PXP Financial aims to stay ahead of the game through innovation, new technologies, and solutions to create a first-class payment experience for their customers. Hi, Koen. How are you doing?
Hi, Stacey. I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How's the last couple of weeks and months been for you?
It's been an interesting ride. I mean, as many businesses out there, it started off obviously being extremely challenging to adjust or adapt to what we call the new norm. Given that we both have an online business and an offline, so card present or card not present business, I kind of say that we are benefiting from an increased online activity. So we were very quick to sort of readjust our focus, get closer to our clients, make sure we remain extremely close to our staff. And so far, we've gone through this storm in quite a nice way. We've grown our business substantially. People remain motivated, connected. Our clients are very happy about what they've received from us. So I think all in all, I'm a happy man.
I like to hear it. Koen, I am so excited just to hear your story and your journey to becoming Group CEO of PXP Financial. I want to hear all about it.
It was an interesting story to the extent that I knew about the former company before it got rebranded. And the way I was introduced to PXP Financial was actually through one of my former clients that I'd been working with for an extensive period of time. And back then, I was actually managing a startup company in the payment space for somebody. I was driving that as a CEO, and at some point, we kind of boarded that company with PXP Financial, we are an acquiring bank, and sort of that startup PSP needed an acquirer at the back end. And I got in touch with that client of mine who was also part of the management team and the board at PXP Financial. And this is how we got back in touch. And I boarded that startup company. And I wasn't too, how shall I say this? I wasn't too impressed with the service I got back then from PXP Financial as a new partner, as a new payment provider. So one thing led to the other, and I sort of got in touch with my friends, and we started exchanging ideas as to how we could improve this. And then at some point, he invited me to talk to the PXP Financial management team as a client and just share my experience with them. Gave them some thoughts, gave them some feedback, and I guess from one thing came the other. At some point, the shareholder offered me a role to join them as a group CEO, and that was it.
Wow, so you took two businesses and made them into one. How did you go about creating a new company culture and just overall ensuring success?
Maybe I need to put things into perspective. I think really creating a completely new company culture is not exactly what we did. I mean, the way we looked at this is that these are two established businesses. So on one side, we have a card present business that's been around for nearly 26, 27 years. On the other side, there's an acquiring bank business that's been around for nearly 18 years. So it's two established, proven organizations and businesses, obviously operating in different jurisdictions, different regions. And yes, to that extent, I agree with you, Stacey, a different culture maybe. Although I think what was really helpful is, first of all, we're a very international company. So if you look at the diversity that we have across our staff is extreme. Secondly, we were very quick to find a common kind of like a red line or a baseline between both organizations. And that was something that immediately jumped into sight, was that both teams had an excessive desire and drive to please clients. So whatever they did, whatever they delivered, it was all focused on making sure that you make your clients happy, you build a trustworthy relationship, and you nurture that and you grow that. And we very much use that as a basis to just get the teams together and sort of then start looking as to how do you integrate the technology platforms. You create a more unified interface for a client. So depending whether you operate across physical stores or via a website, you interact with the same interface, connecting to the same platform. And then I think it's very much down to, one is the processes that you align, but then most importantly, the people. And I think that from our perspective was a pretty safe calculation because, again, as I mentioned, those people shared the same underlying DNA as a challenging company or a challenger in the market where we compete against some really large competitors, that common DNA was very much about, yes, we might be smaller, but we try harder, and therefore, whatever we do is going to be aimed at making you almost like delighted as a client.
What would you say was one of the biggest challenges you faced when merging? If someone's currently going through a merger, what advice would you give to them?
I think it depends. You need to break it down into a number of factors. One is the history of the company, especially in the technology space. What's the legacy technology that you operate on? Is it developed in house? Is it an open platform? Is it you work with third parties? What's the age of that technology? What was the refresh rate? So I think technology is definitely one layer. The second thing is your processes, right? So if you do a merger between two organizations, then you need to align your processes, which means like, a 24/7 help desk. How do you now
Mm-hmm.
get a call in from a client that, let's say, has a card present terminal device in a shop next to a client that operates a website, and you treat them through the same post sales or customer support interface. So that would be the second challenge, I think, which is not to be underestimated. The third one is the physical locations. So we operate quite remotely. We employ over 200 people across 6 locations in the world. So you have that physical distance and separation to get teams aligned. So that's definitely something you need to keep in mind. And the fourth thing, which I personally find very important, you need to find a common goal and a common objective. So I think it's all about creating
Definitely.
this, what is it that you're aiming for, and then making sure you communicate that throughout the team so that people can personalize with a common objective. And then just make sure that you make that very transparent. You report against it. You get people involved in collective dialogue, and then at some point people will grow into that sort of belonging into that collective objective.
We were also chatting a couple weeks ago about the changes that were made in the management team. How did you know what needed to change, and how did that impact the business going forward?
That's a very good question, Stacey. The first thing I did when I came in is obviously speak to as many people and clients as possible, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's always two groups of people that will give you an unbiased, I would say, feedback as to how the company is typically doing. One is your employees. If you have unhappy employees or people that don't feel, in their spot or so, then that kind of like gives you a sign as to, have they been coached in the right way? Was the leadership team clear on the objectives? Was there the right support platform? So that was one area where I started to speak to people. And then the second thing was clients. Clients are the second group that will basically tell you whether or not you deserve their business. And it very soon came apparent that, when I joined the company, there had been really, really good initiatives and ideas, but I guess there was a challenge with what I would define as the execution of those ideas. So one is that those two companies that I just mentioned were never really integrated to a point where it became a unified interface. So that was something that I think from a project planning perspective was never really pursued with a high sense of passion and consistency. And I think the second challenge that probably the company has, or had at least, was there was quite some changes in the management team, which basically means that you get a change of objective or you get a change of style and direction. And so what we did quite quickly was, on one side, making sure that we had a 3-year plan that was signed off by the shareholder, and have a complete transparent communication about what were those objectives, and then hire really, really what I would call experts in each of their area. Whether it's in the finance area, in the operations, commercial area, hire people that I knew from my personal network, but also people that we found, and took them through quite an extensive recruitment process. And I personally think profiling is extremely important. I think when you recruit people, the science bit is one element, but the second thing is, do those personalities, those profiles, will they match the culture of your company? And so we did some work in that space, and I think now we have a very capable leadership team.
How was the change taken internally? This might be a very personal question, but if you feel comfortable, I'm just
Yeah.
really curious.
Yeah. Well, you have to. I think you have to live with the assumption that for a lot of people, change means insecurity, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
if you, if you're used to work according to a certain mode or modus routine. You have a family, you have kids to support, you have a mortgage. I mean, you balance your life on the back of security. So anybody that comes in and says, you know what, we're going to change all of this, it's like it creates insecurity. It could make people uncomfortable. I think the one way to do this, well, I'm not saying the way, but clearly what we aimed for is that we involved people in that change process. So effectively, you could argue many of those people, next line managers, but also employees and so, were part of workshops where we collectively made those decisions. We had an offsite where we involved people and, what's working, what's not working. This is the feedback from your clients. What would you do to change it? And then all of a sudden, it becomes their own decision to change the company and to change the rules. So I think all in all, change comes with a challenge, but if you can somehow, I guess, provide change in a way where you can demonstrate successes, you can demonstrate that you're actually moving forward as a company. And secondly, that change is also driven by people that do the work and they get it and they are involved, and you allow empowerment. You really push people to make decisions, take accountability, almost going to a culture where you say, it's okay to make a mistake. Just learn from
Yeah.
that mistake and move on. And I know I sound like a cliche, Stacey, when I say something like this, but I still see many companies not really preaching or living that effective style of, empower your people. You hire, you don't hire smart people to tell them what to do, just let them do, be there to support them, let them take the risk. And then I think that change will actually go smoother and faster than you believe.
Interesting. Definitely when people understand why there is change, it's easier to accept. Definitely.
Absolutely. I think you need to make people aware why the company is where it is, why clients tell you what they tell you, and then you need to link that to what is it that we could do better. Do we want to
Yeah.
continue doing what we do, knowing that the world outside is moving forward, or do we make our own decisions? And then once you make that decision, how do you live it? How do you track your performance? How do you track
Yeah.
progress? How do you share your progress with all the people that are involved in the process, which, by the way, as I said, is also your clients. You need to keep your clients totally informed about that change process and why you're doing it, and how is that going to provide a better service and a better partnership for your clients.
Talking about clients, we've chatted quite a bit about technology, really believing in the purpose and value, else you can't sell it. What tips do you have for those struggling to sell technology?
Um, well, I think when you sell technology, what has always helped me is what's the purpose of technology? Regardless of what type of technology you offer, how does it contribute into a process? What is it that your technology does? If you're in a B2B business, then how does your technology contribute to the process of another business so that they in turn can then have a successful offer, whether it's to consumers, to another business, to their own? Is it a cost decrease? Is it an increase in efficiency? Is it more optimization? Is it a higher efficiency? So I think at the end, always need to ask yourself, like, what am I doing with my offer in that process? And when we train people or so, and we ask them to do role plays when they present an offer, and they say, well, we have this type of technology, the question is like, well, so what? And the famous so what question sometimes helps people to understand how you drill it down to a benefit as opposed to a feature. And I think there's a lot of people in technology space that still sell features as opposed to a true benefit into a process. And I think once you drill it down to that benefit, then you know what it does and how it contributes. And Stacey, you mentioned earlier on change. How did we deal with change? When you offer something to a client or to a prospect, effectively you also bring change, because that company has been used to work according to a certain style or a certain way, and you come in with your technology and say, you know what, the red pill is better than the blue pill. My red pill is better than
Yeah.
your blue pill. But you need to convince them about, that why is it better? How will that contribute? So I think, long story short, to answer your question, I think homework, try to understand who your clients are, do your research, do your homework, speak with your clients, and really try to understand what their challenges are in their business, and then try to match your technology in a way where you can convince them that by using your offer, you're actually going to solve a number of business challenges or matters that they are struggling with, and that they're not getting any, I would say, right solution from their existing partners.
We internally at Talent in the Cloud have just changed systems, and you
Yes.
see how different groups push back because there's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Having to just use new technology takes training, especially those that have been in the company longer, that have been using one system for years.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really difficult, but I think when you show them why there's been this change or how this can help and streamline processes, I think that the team slowly understands why there's been this change. So step one, you convince your client that this new technology is the way to go. Step two, how do you make sure they're giving the right tools, or you're giving the right tools to sell your product to the board of directors? Because this person has to go and then convince the rest of the company that this is the right way to go.
I love that piece, because I think, and we chatted before about this.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very high degree of empathy. I think when you successfully offer something, people buy technology and science. At the end, they also buy a relationship, and I think it's how effective are you as a messenger, as a person, as an expert, to provide them something that you take away that risk of change as much as possible, right? And I think one of the items that we've always looked at is when you talk to your counterpart at a client, that person in turn will have to convince their internal management team or the board, or let's say the organism that at the end will have to decide to move from, let's say, a company a provider A, to a provider B. And so you need to understand, one is how that company operates, and two, I think you need to give very tangible arguments about your value proposition as to where, again, in their business process, you're going to add value. So again, is it a cost decrease? Is it an increase in revenue? Is it an increase in efficiency? Is it a broaden of their portfolio so that they can then basically tap into new markets, new industries? And there's a long list of items that you can select for yourself that are, let's say, again, are the features of your product. But when you make those features more personal and you link them to that business process, then you make them appear more as to what benefits are. So that's kind of like what I call the science and the technology play. Next to that, you have to be also empathetic about the person that is going to defend you as a potentially new partner is going to take a tremendous risk, because that person might stand in front of a board and say, you know what, you've been working with this provider for the last 8 years. I think we should change. And here is a new company. And worst case scenario is that board has never heard about PXP
Yeah.
Financial or that new company, right? So that person is taking a tremendous risk in convincing his or her board to go with a new partner. There again, I think the whole preparation work, when you work with that person, the fact that you stick to agreements. If something's been asked, you deliver on time. You're building on a trustworthy relationship, so that that person, that risk gets reduced in that person's mind. That so far everything you've said you would do, you've actually done it. You've delivered it. You've worked with me. You've given me all the elements I need. So I feel relatively safe to stand in front of my board to make that judgment call. But there will always be a risk in doing that. And so we also felt that if you want to target audiences as a new provider or so, I mean, typically it's people that just recently changed jobs or just got promoted or were just recently hired. Those are often the people as well that still need to prove themselves. And often the way to prove yourself is to break a bit with the norm. If you stick with the existing providers and players, then yes, you could do an annual benchmark and try to reduce that pricing a little bit, but it's very much a status quo type of situation. However, if I am hired into a company and within 6 months I convince my board to add a new provider, technology provider, and that technology provider happens to be the right choice, and you really change the game, then I've done a pretty good job. In my new role, I've literally taken the risk to go out there and break a little bit with the institution or the legacy, find a new company, get it in there, and all of a sudden those business results are much better. And that's where I'm a big believer in sort of what I call making heroes out there. by targeting those people that want to have change. They live by change and they're willing to take that risk. And if you partner with those people and you, let's say like I said, you deliver against the expectations and you build a strong relationship, then you have far more chances of breaking the legacy and move yourself in as a new provider, as opposed to, I would say, the institution that's been in there for years and years.
On this topic, PHP is a challenger company, which you mentioned earlier. And this is something I'd love to dive into. Challenger companies have to work harder to compete with the big guys. How do you make sure you're also working smarter? And how can challengers differentiate themselves in the market?
I think at PXP Financial we have a great pool of experts, but we don't. There's plenty. Well, plenty. There's 3, 4 very large players out there in our space that have more means, more resources, more scale than we do, and yet, at the end we still win business that we take away from them. I think um, when you operate in this market, you need to be very, very, I would say, clear about what is it that you bring into the equation. So you mentioned also, yeah, we work harder, but harder as opposed to working smarter. I think the good feature about being a challenger in the market is that you will always try harder. Now, if you position it in the right way, then the fact you're a challenger, you will just try harder, work harder, provide more effort or energy in proving that you can do better than the big institutions out there. And the reality of the matter is that, in our world, the famous old saying, nobody gets fired for choosing IBM. Nobody gets fired for choosing BT Global Services or like an established institution. But I think, again, if you relate to what I said earlier on, if you find the right people in that company that really want to bring change, if you find the right business arguments, then there is definitely a big possibility for clients to move away from what supposedly they've been doing for many, many years, assuming this was the best setup, and then all of a sudden you come along, and if you've done, let's say, your homework well, then you provide change, but change for the better. And I think, in essence, to come back to what you said, working smarter, I think a lot depends on preparation, a lot depends on homework. When I started, and this is many, many, many moons ago, there was no internet. We didn't have laptops at work, and it was all, when before we visited the company, we went into the yellow pages, we went into press clippings, and we found as much background as possible to at least come prepared. We did our homework, so we had a dialogue with our counterpart in that company where we could at least talk about the company. We'd read the latest financial reports, and we had let's say, a hook as to how we could start engaging. In today's world, the information is just all over the place.
It's
And yet I
endless.
still see a lot of people that don't necessarily invest enough time to collect that information and do something with it. So when you're a salesperson, or when you're, let's say, the owner of a business, and you want to reach out with a client or a potential client, make sure you're well prepared. Do your research. There's plenty of data out there. And so when you speak to your counterpart, you kind of like give them the feeling you're really, really interested in their business, because, again, you've read about them, you know about the latest press release, you know about the latest acquisition, you know about the latest customer win. And these are small things which I do think make a difference. And it makes the whole story more relevant, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you only get one shot. So you want to make sure that you come prepared and that you leave
Exactly.
that meeting knowing you couldn't have done anything more.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, how do you excite people in a very short amount of time? And the only way to do that is that you speak their language, you speak about their business. It's not about your business. So the famous, and this is old school stuff I'm going to tell you, but you know the best conversations you have with potential clients is you speak 1%, they speak 99%. The ideal sales, I would say, success for me is not the fact that you sell something, it's the fact that your client buys something from you because they want to buy it from you, because you convince them about a value that you bring and they want to do business with you. So I think you need to, especially in technology, again, you need to turn or flip, that how should I say this assumption around and position yourself as an expert in what you do, regardless of whether you're a challenger or not. Because I think the same applies also to established institutions. I think it's just that they might be a bit more slower or more lazy because they have reached a certain state in their life cycle, which we as a challenger and so many other challenging companies out there would love to obtain. But then again, would you ever want to obtain that position? Maybe it's better to just stay a challenger and stay sharp.
I love it. Koen, thank you so much for being on this episode. I loved having you on. Where's the best place for listeners to reach you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So if you just Google my name, Koen Vanpraet, PXP Financial, you'll find me. I'm on Twitter as well. And I suppose now you will ask my Twitter name. It's K Vanpraet on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks again.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for the good questions, Stacey. Stay safe.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.